early February 2020. It's midday. As you can see, it started to snow earlier today, a few hours ago. They're anticipating 4 to 6 inches in the next 24 hours or so. And it keeps snowing like this, I think we'll have all of that before it's over. It got down into the teens last night in terms of Fahrenheit. Pretty typical weather for where I live this time of year. I have to confess, I am not a winter or cold weather fan, at least not anymore. So I can enjoy my retirement in a nice warm shop and enjoying the winter through glass. Well, welcome back, folks. In this brief shop talk, we're going to discuss a bit hardware, JIS, or Japanese Industrial Standard Hardware, and how I organize some of my hardware. I was recently going through and cleaning some of this up and reorganizing my nuts, bolts, and screws. That's what I am referring to when I say hardware, fasteners. And it occurred to me that folks might be interested in seeing the methodology or process that I use to keep track of my hardware and how I manage this. And I do have to go through this probably once a year or so to kind of reset everything, because this over time will get a little bit jumbled up, of course, as I'm working through various projects. Nonetheless, this is the primary storage system that I use for my day-to-day hardware I use on my Japanese motorcycle projects. And the way this is organized is I have in this top section here these two rows, and up to this empty container here, JIS, or Japanese Industrial Standard Hardware, in certain standard lengths. So you can see, I think, 3 millimeter, 8 millimeter long, 3 millimeter, 12 long, 4 millimeter, 10 long, and etc. I have 2 3 millimeter bins. I have 2 4 millimeter bins, 1 5 millimeter. I don't find I use that much 5 millimeter hardware. And then multiples of the 6 millimeter, starting here and ending here, and several standard lengths. And the reason I have gone to standard lengths is I can cut down from a longer length if I need something in between sizes, and that way I don't have to inventory everything. And since I use far more 6 millimeter JIS hardware than virtually any other size, that's why I have multiple sizes or lengths of the 6 millimeter. So for instance, if I pull out the 5 millimeter, you can see there, I think, what that looks like. These are all JIS screws. They're not necessarily OEM, that is from one of the big four, but they are made to the JIS standard. This empty drawer is just a divider, and over the years I've actually consolidated out of multiple more sizes than you see here, so I have some empties. These four right here are empties. Starting here, I have metric, but non-JIS, or ISO or DIN standards. So I have 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 5, all the way up through 10. That's what these are. These are 10 millimeter. You can see there. And then beyond that, I have a bin for some tire items here, Schrader valves, caps, some tools to take apart Schrader valves, etc. This is miscellaneous hardware that's new right here. You see, for instance, I have a socket head set screw. It's a 5 millimeter in diameter by 10 millimeter in length. I have all my used metric 6 millimeter, almost all of these are JIS fasteners. In this one, I use so much more 6 millimeter, as I mentioned, that I keep all the 6 millimeter in here. You can see there. And then I have miscellaneous hardware in this bottom drawer right here. That is could be anything. It could be anything from pieces of chain to bushings. And then over here I have all the other sizes of my Japanese hardware. This could be 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 12, etc. Because remember, all the 6 millimeter is here. Again, I don't use near as much of this as I do with 6 millimeter. I actually do have quite a bit more of this miscellaneous hardware in this drawer. And another plastic storage container off to the side, because I have far more of this than I just store in this container, or this storage unit. When I break down a bike, when I'm done restoring it, I sort through all the hardware, nuts, bolts, washers, and screws, and I salvage what I can. So if anything's beat up, the heads are all beat up, they've got plier marks on them, I generally will recycle those, throw those in my metal recycling bin, and recycle the damaged items. The good hardware, something that's reusable or salvageable, will usually end up in one of these bins like this one here. You can see I've even got a few socket head styles, but again, these are all metric. I don't put away or store anywhere else any of the used fasteners. They all get recycled or sorted and inventoried and put away. This does not contain any of the original OEM hardware that I buy from the Big Four. So if I purchase hardware from Yamaha, for instance, and I don't use it, which happens, of course, from time to time, that is stored separately by part number. I have a database I've put together that I keep track of all my part numbers by manufacturer, so I've 4 separate tables within a database, and I can look up part numbers then. And occasionally I will substitute, it's not unknown, substitute a Kawasaki screw for a Yamaha part if I can't get the Yamaha easily, or I can't get it at all, but I can get it in Kawasaki in the same size and this GIS standard, such as these kind of fasteners. It won't make any difference at all. And I will substitute the Kawasaki for Yamaha, Suzuki for Kawasaki, Honda for Yamaha, etc. I have found historically that Honda is a little bit harder to substitute than the other 3. I can mix and match Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Yamaha pretty easily. Occasionally I can mix and match Honda into that, but for some reason Honda seems to use a little bit different type of fastener in some cases, not always, but in some cases, than the other 3. It's Honda after all, so great company, but they kind of do their own thing. Anyway, these are not OEM parts. These are aftermarket GIS fasteners. They're new. Up here, these are all new, for instance, right here. They're all brand new, but they do match the GIS standard. And if I compare this, this is a 40 millimeter, 6 millimeter 0.1 pitch, or 1 pitch, 40 millimeter in length. I compare this to a Kawasaki, Suzuki, or Yamaha part, it'll be identical. It'll be absolutely identical. You can't distinguish the difference. So GIS here, non-GIS but metric in here, and miscellaneous fasteners down in here. And I keep this stored right on my workbench, right back in here, and it's easily available to me as I'm in the middle of doing my projects. Now, if I can get OEM hardware from the manufacturers reasonably inexpensively, I will do that. This is really my backup plan, is what this is. I will typically try to use OEM supplied hardware if at all possible, and it's reasonably priced. I'm not going to go out and buy an OEM, I'm going to say 45 millimeter JS painthead screw from, for instance, Yamaha, that's no longer available from Yamaha, but on eBay, and pay $9 for it. I'm not going to do that. And you will see those kind of situations where people, I believe, are taking advantage of folks. What I would do then is, if I needed a 45 millimeter GIS screw for Yamaha, I would take a 50, lot 5 millimeters off of it. If you're concerned about rust where you cut it off, that 5 millimeters, take a little fingernail polish and coat the end of the screw, or you can use a little clear coat, spray a little, take the clear coat, spray it in the cap, the plastic cap, take a little fine paintbrush, dab it in there, put a couple coats of clear coat on the raw metal, and you're back in business. So you don't need to worry about rust. But I'll just cut these down if I need to substitute, or I don't feel like paying highway robbery type prices to use original hardware in some cases. Anyway, that's how I organize my hardware for my Japanese bike projects. Now we're going to move on to the next part of this conversation, and we're going to discuss sourcing and where and how I buy this, and an option or two you might have. What you see down the middle here, these three separate little plastic bags, is original. These are brand new Kawasaki parts. Pull these out of my inventory. I have a bigger inventory of Kawasaki parts than I do the other three because I historically work on more Kawasaki's than the other three. Nonetheless, these part numbers right here are still available from Kawasaki. In fact, these are just been accumulated over the years. So I went out and did a little research recently, and this happens to be I can tell from the part number, it's a 6x35. That's the last four digits of the part number right there. And the current price for these screws on Partzilla is 75 cents each. And you can buy them, like I said, new right now. And then we have 6x12s that are 53 cents each. And this is an outlier. This is a flyer. These are 6x20s are $3.21 each. And I triple checked that number just to make sure I had it right. I don't know why these are so much more expensive than these other two. I have no idea, but I got it right off their website just a day or so ago. And you can order these all day long. By way of example, because sometimes you can't, for some of the other brands or older machines or an odd size, you might not be able to buy the size that you need. You can certainly buy a longer one, like this 35, and cut it down to a 32 if you wanted to. But the inventory I just showed you a few minutes ago of the JIS screws in some of the standard sizes. In this case here, I just pulled out one of the drawers, and it's a 6 millimeter, 40 millimeters long. So that would be closest in comparison to these screws right here. And just to show you that these are in fact JIS standard, let me just pull one of these new Kawasaki screws out. Even though it's the wrong length, you can see from the head right there that they are virtually identical. So these third-party screws right here, I normally buy online through a company called McMaster Carr, which is a very large industrial supplier in the U.S. based out of, I believe it's the Chicago area. Very quick delivery, very quick service, not necessarily the cheapest, but they are very responsive and easy to do business with. I'm not necessarily encouraging one to buy from McMaster Carr. I'm just using them as an illustration for what I do. In particular, if you're international in Europe or the UK, I'm sure you have suppliers also locally that could serve the same function. But by way of example, I went to McMaster Carr's website, of course, and pulled these part numbers for these part sizes here. And this is what their website looks like. These are the part numbers right here, or the parts that we just talked about. And I just consolidated that information onto this spreadsheet you can see right here and make it simple for us. So here's the Kawasaki parts. This reflects these three part numbers right here, and this is just, again, to give you a sense of pricing. And this is the current Partzilla price that I just talked about. And then here's the current McMaster Carr pricing for these same size. They don't have, obviously, the Kawasaki part numbers. They do have these sizes. They have many, many sizes of screws in terms of length. And they also have standard package size. So you see that on the M612, their package size is 25, 25, and 10, respectively. So you have to get the piece part price, you got to divide the package price by 25 to come up with the individual price. That's what you see right here. So they're not often the cheapest. In fact, usually they're not. You can see here McMaster Carr's price is 54 cents a piece for this screw, 64 cents a piece for this screw, and $1.14 per piece for this screw. So they're not necessarily inexpensive. I don't use them because they're inexpensive. I use them because they're convenient, they're readily available. I can have them usually the next day, and they also offer sizes that sometimes you can't get anymore from the OEMs. So in the case of this screw that's $3.21, which is the 6x20 right here, McMaster Carr's price per piece is 64 cents. And again, these screws are virtually, well, they are identical. They're made to the same standard. Most McMaster Carr's GIS hardware I find comes from Taiwan. I don't know if any of it comes from Japan. I think all of it I've got over the years has been made in Taiwan, but in terms of finish and quality and size, it's always been dead nuts on for me in terms of the originals. So there are options out there to purchase GIS hardware from non-OEM sources. If you find yourself in a bind, that's where I buy virtually all of my standard hardware I just talked about in my storage, little storage container rack there. Comes from McMaster Carr just because they're convenient for me. The new hardware like you see here, and I do have this for all the brands, that being Suzuki, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Honda, but I just have far more of it for Kawasaki. And I keep this separate, obviously, from the parts container I just showed you, storage container a minute ago. And I keep track of all of these actually in a database that I have, so I can look up any of these part numbers and see if I have them in stock. And perhaps sometime we'll talk about that at another time. My point here is just to share with you some of my process in thinking in terms of how I handle my hardware, my new and used hardware. I trust this might be a benefit to some of you. If nothing else, maybe some interest. Any issues, questions, or thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.